Hi there, welcome to today's lesson on data types and concatenation. Um, First of all, I'm going to use PyCharm edu, and I'm going to create a new uh, Python file, so file new Python file, and I am going to call this data types. Now, in Python, when you're programming, you don't if you're just assigning a value to a variable, okay, you don't necessarily need to store a value, tell it that it's going to be what type of data it's going to have. However, when you start coming across inputs, that is when you're going to have to start using data types. So, for example, if I create two variables, one called num1 and store 34, and another called num2, and I am going to store 23, and then I will print the outcome of num1 add num2. Okay, and what should happen when I right click and run the program, it will add those two numbers together. The nice thing with Python, when I assign the values, so I am assigning a number to this variable, it will automatically know what data type it is. It's saying, is it a number? Is it an integer, which is a whole number? A float, which is a decimal? Or if you're putting a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols, then that will be a string. However, where it becomes a bit tricky is when I introduce input. And I use the input function, and in double quotes or speech marks, I say please enter number 1, and I do the same here. Input, please enter number 2. Okay, and this time when I right click and run data types, I run the program. Okay, it will ask me please enter number 1. So I will put 36. I press enter in the console and it says please enter number 2. So I say 23. Press enter. But this time it doesn't add them, it joins them together. It concatenates. Okay? And the reason for this is that when I'm using an input function, it automatically thinks, Python automatically thinks I am entering a string. And so therefore, when I use the plus, okay, it will join these values together. Okay? So therefore, I don't want that. I want to add these two together. I want to add these two numbers together. So therefore, I need to assign these variables and tell it it's going to be a number. And there are two types. Okay? There is an int, okay, which stands for integer, which is a whole number, and then there is a float, which is a decimal. Okay, now if I try and type a decimal number when I've told it will be a whole number, an integer, it will come up with an error. So here I'm now going to I'm going to tell it that the value I'm going to input will be a whole number. So that will be an int. So I put int, open bracket, then my next function input. And because I have two brackets here, and in PyCharm it actually has a little red line there, it tells me I'm missing something there. And I can see with the highlighted parts that this bracket, this closing bracket, is for this opening bracket. Therefore, I need to put another opening bracket here. So I like to put a few spaces and another closing bracket. Same, I need to do the same here. Int, open bracket, and at the end, I put a few spaces, closing bracket. So when I right click and run, it will ask me for the number 36, ask me for number 2, 52, and this time, because I've told it that the values I want to input are going to be an integer, a whole number. It will now, instead of joining them together, it will add them together. Okay, so I'll add these two numbers. Okay, but of course, if I run this again and I try and enter 1.5, it will crash. It won't work. And the reason for that is because I've told this will be a whole number, and I'm trying to store a decimal. Okay, so instead, if I want to store decimals, I need to tell it will be a float. Okay, can I have one as a float and one as an int? So one is a decimal, one is a whole number. Let us see. So if I put 2.5, 36, and it will add them together and it will work. Okay, so that's perfect. If now I can do it down here. So if I say ans equals int, and I do num1 add num2, and one's a float, one's an int, what will happen then? What will happen here is it will add the two numbers together, but it will slice off the decimal. Okay, so if I do 2.356 and then I have 45, it will just read back 47. So it will cut off the decimal. Okay. Likewise, if I want to use, so that's float and that's int. So I can do the same here for storing a name. So I can say name equals str, which means string. It's basically like a string of pearls. So you've got all the characters, all the symbols, all the numbers joined together. So str. Then I say input, and then I say please enter your name. And I like to put spaces here between the two closing brackets, so I identify that I need them. I can say age equals, for this, I will use a float. Input, please enter your age. And again, I like to put the extra brackets there. And again, I'm going to say year, as in year group. So I'm going to say this is int because it's a whole number. And I'm going to say input. And I'll say, please enter a year group. Okay? And I'll put some spaces here. And underneath, I will then read this back. But this time, I'm going to concatenate. And concatenate basically means to join things together. Okay? So rather than, instead of doing this, instead of saying name on one line, print age on another line, and year on another line, I can join them together. And I like to use commas, so I can say name, comma, speech marks. If it's not code, then I have to put them in speech marks. So name is And after I separate each part by a comma, so age, comma, speech marks, years old, okay, full stop, comma, oh, he is in year, close speech marks, comma, I can put year here, close brackets. So when I right click and run, it will ask me, and it will do the first part, of course, so 36, 45. It'll ask me for my name, so I can say Anthony. Please enter your age, 23. Your year group, I will put 9. Enter, and it will say Anthony is 23 years old. He is in year 9. And because I made it, I told it it was going to be a float. Okay, it has now said, instead of being 23, it said 23.0. Okay, and that is the end of today's lesson.